We're rolling.
This is a home interview, Lawrence, New York. It is the 4th of August, 2004. The interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert, approximately 9 a.m. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Robert C. Baldridge, Omaha, Nebraska. Date of birth, November 9, 1924.
Okay, what was your educational background prior to entering service?
3 years of high school, Omaha Central High. 1 year at Hotchkiss School in Lakeville, Connecticut. And both before the war and after war too, at Yale University. I finally got a BA there in February of 1948 after returning. I had a freshman year there, then the service, then I went back.
Okay. Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I was it was at Hotchkiss Prep, and everybody was just amazed, and read the New York Times, of course, and watched or heard what was going on the radio, and it just enthused all of us to get through, get out, and get moving, and get into the service. And actually, I was not a senior; it was my upper mid or junior year there, and maybe I was 16 and a half, or just 17. And I was able to get into Yale for 2 or 3 terms, and then enlisted in the Enlisted Reserve Corps.
Okay. Why did you decide to go into the Army?
Well, like many boys or young men, my father was a battery commander in the artillery in World War I, and he was back in service, an administrative job as a major at the time in the Air Corps. So I wanted to go into the Army because of his Army service in War I, and I wanted to go into the artillery because he was artillery all the way and had been in artillery ROTC in World War I. And I wanted to follow in his footsteps.
Okay. Where did you go when did you go into the service, and where did you go for your basic training?
As I mentioned, I had enlisted in the ERC,
Right.
which meant that I'd have another term at Yale, and I was in the first year of basic ROTC artillery there. So you had a chance enlisting. You could specify the branch of service in the Army that you wanted to. So I specified artillery, and as a result, when my name was called up a few months later, I went to basic training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay.
13 weeks of
right.
regular basic training, which happened to be field artillery, and the field artillery training I had at Yale on the old out-of-date French 75s. I used to kid around with my friends and the Army sergeants there that maybe this old 75 cannon was 75 millimeter was maybe one that one of my father's batteries from World War I.
Okay, what kind of weapons did you train on at Bragg?
Basic Army weapons such as the M1 caliber 30 Garand rifle.
Right.
Also howitzers, of course, not the 75s because they were all obsolete, but 105s, and we got a look at 155 millimeter howitzers, which are the regular howitzers that are in an infantry division, in the artillery of an infantry division. They have 3 battalions of 105s and 1 battalion of 155s.
All right, now did you go into officer training at all?
No, no, the ROTC, the 1 year basic training of ROTC didn't allow me any preference at all for OCS. And while I was in basic training at that time, the Army Specialized Training Program had been put into effect called ASTP. And if you had a general test, the general classification test, score of 115 or higher, at that time you were automatically sent to a university for that program. There's no way I wanted that. There wasn't anything I could do about it. I complained, and I complained. They finally got fed up with me and said, "Okay, you can be shipped out. You'll be shipped out probably to England." And that's exactly what I wanted, and that's what happened. And I went over in the Queen Mary, which was really a thrilling episode as far as transportation was concerned.
So you went over as a single ship?
I went over in a single on the
Because
Queen Mary, along with about 15,000 other, mostly private soldiers.
Now you went over as a replacement?
Yes, as a replacement. And so I finally ended up after about 3 or 4 or 5 days processing, after having landed in Scotland on the Queen, I ended up with the 9th Infantry Division, and I was basically in the Winchester area I went in December of 1943, and of course the invasion was the next June of 44, and I was with the 9th, and I stayed with the 9th right on through the end of the war in the Elbe, and then occupation in Germany, until I got home in January of 46.
Okay. Being in England for those almost a half a year, did you have any much contact with English people?
Being a private, very little. One of my turned out to be a very close friend, but who was an officer at the time, a First Lieutenant, Don Harrison, just died a year or 2 ago, because all these fellows were, the 9th Division was a veteran division having gone through North Africa and Sicily. And Don Harrison, I said, just sadly died a year or 2 ago. Maybe he was 6 or 7 years older than me. He'd been ROTC at Ohio University. And turned out right at the end of the war in Munich, he called up his girlfriend that he didn't know he was involved with at all, and married her. Very happy arrangement. I didn't. We pulled guard duty and trained on our. I was in a 155 battalion under under Lieutenant Colonel William C. Westmoreland, and we just did normal training functions that whole 6 months. We felt we were pretty well trained by the time the end of the 6 months came up. And of course, these the regulars in the 9th Division that had been through Africa and Sicily, they already knew what the hell they were doing, and I was thrilled to have been a part of a pro division like that, because it helped save their experience helped save us all, really, from many accidents. You know, like, don't fool around with things that could be booby traps, you know, that you learn the hard way. Well, they taught us.
How did you feel about Westmoreland as a commander?
Absolutely superior, the best. Now, some people outside of our division thought he was like a Boy Scout, but he wasn't any Boy Scout. We respected him because of his knowledge and his ability to command the battalion. I mean, he wasn't. You didn't call him Westy except behind his back. But he was most admired, and it was ridiculous in our opinion, whether you're an officer or a private, this baloney that he took from Mike Wallace as a result of the problem in Vietnam. Now, I'm sure if he had it to do all over again, he might have made some adjustments in there. But I'm telling you, we honored and respected that man up to the limit.
Did you have any personal interaction with him?
Yes, a few times, because he knew that I'd been to college, which set me somewhat apart from most of the guys in the division, and turned out that he had an eye on me. I didn't know it at the time, or it developed that he had an eye on me at the time, because I ended up getting a battlefield commission, they call it, during combat towards the end of the war. But I didn't have really any personal. Matter of fact, he had been promoted several times after Normandy and went on up through the division. And his successor's battalion commander, dead now, Lieutenant Colonel Alvar B. Sundin, was actually my commanding officer through most of the European campaign. And he's the guy that sent my name up to Army headquarters to get this commission. I was surprised when I got it. I didn't know this was in the works at all.
Okay, now, when did you go into Normandy?
June 10, 1944, which was D+4, on Utah Beach, wading in. It was the easy beach.
What was it like as you went in? What was your impression of the beach area as you went in?
Well, we had been trained to what to expect, and we knew from radio contact, landed on, I guess it was an LST with the front, clanks down, and we knew we'd be landing on a beach that was under sporadic artillery attacks. Not serious, but sporadic. And that's what happened. So going over, the side walls of the LST, all you could see was the sky, and we're all jammed in there, so there wasn't much to do for that trip from Southampton over to the beach. So we did things like make sure our shoelaces were tied tightly, leggings were tied tightly, because we knew we'd be wading in, and we didn't want the sand or the water. We did things like that. And when we actually landed, we were in I don't know, 3 or 4 feet of water, but it was relatively quite calm, and we had no problem just landing. And there were MPs all over, the beach masters and their assistants and MPs all over the place. We started just walking up. We were not under attack, except that sporadic stuff I mentioned, and walked up and hiked around for 4 or 5 hours, and spent the first night near Saint Marie, because I looked it up, Saint Marie du Mont, M-O-N-T.
Now, what kind of weapon were you carrying at that time?
Carbine, the M1 carbine, the new carbine. Also, we had 45 pistols that the carbine was supposed to replace. The officers had just 45 pistols.
What was your rank at this time?
Private.
Okay, so you were a private, and do you carry the 45 and a carbine?
Both, yes.
Both, okay.
Yeah.
Now,
The official thing was just the carbine, but I collected a 45 on the beach, and most of us did likewise. I still have it.
Did you carry grenades also?
No, that was not issued to the artillerymen. No.
Now, with your artillery unit, how were the guns towed? Did they come in the same LST with you?
No. No, our LST, we were just the, they came in on similar or larger boats, and it took the division maybe 2 to 3 days to get assembled and together. We were not an assault division.
Right.
In my beach, the assault division was the Ivy, the 4th Infantry Division, and the follow-up assault division was the 90th Division, and then my 9th Division was the follow-up after that. And the policy, or the deal was that the 4th and the 90th they were the assault troops, and we were supposed to land without too much difficulty, which we did, and get assembled, and therefore we would be fresh, and take over from these assault guys who would be tired out after 4 and 5 days of rough life, and we would be fresh and ready to go to cut the peninsula. And we knew that at the time. We didn't know about it before we got on the assault boats, but we learned about it then. So the whole division is about 15,000 men and equipment, and it takes a couple of days to land and get together, and then the command goes out, hey, let's go, which is what we did. And the 9th Division was the division that actually cut the Normandy Peninsula. We didn't stop. We turned immediately northwest to head for Cherbourg. That was my division, but three divisions went up to Cherbourg. It was my division that actually made the capture and captured that big general, von Schlieben, or whatever his name was, at Cherbourg. We thought we'd then get a rest, but the 9th didn't. It went further on out to the Point Hague, which was the tip of the peninsula. And that took about 4 days and killed about 50 guys at least.
Now, how were your guns towed?
We had, for the landing and for a few months, they were towed by trucks, big Diamond T trucks, big GMC 6-wheelers or something, you know, standard large trucks towed
Like a
by
deuce
them.
and a half, they call them, I believe.
Deuce and a half.
Yeah, that's
Two and a half ton.
that's right. Made by Diamond T Company and GMC. That's right. And then I don't know exactly when, but say after a month or so, we got what they called prime movers, which were essentially tractors. You know, tractors with a square rectangular body with a rather thin sheeting of metal for protection, open tractors, and they stayed on as the method of movement right through to the end of the war.
Now, when you landed and in this campaign, what was your assignment with the battery?
Well, I had various assignments throughout the whole campaign. While training in England, and for at least a month in Normandy, I was in the survey section, which was part of headquarters company in my battalion, in the 34th Field Artillery Battalion. And survey section, of course, plots in the guns. You follow the colonel around, who's in charge of, lieutenant colonel, battalion commander, who's in charge of selecting the position for the, whenever you move, the new position for the guns. And you plot in the guns. You go up with the colonel, who also selects the OP point for the forward observers. You plot that position in. It's a great job. You had to do a little mathematics. I guess because I'd been to college, I figured I could do some mathematics. And the survey section was run by a sergeant and a staff sergeant. Then there was another sergeant, a corporal, and about 5 or 6 privates like me. And we just did everything together. And this Don Harrison that I mentioned earlier, was the survey officer. And that's one reason I got to know him so well. Then after the survey section, they moved me around in different jobs. Having been in the survey section, I'd been up to OPs many, many times to plot them in, as I mentioned, and I began to learn about how a forward observer operated. And so I became a member of an OP crew, led by a forward observer who was always a second lieutenant or first lieutenant, and I carried the radios. Another guy drove the Jeep that the three of us, usually a three-man crew, the forward observer, a lieutenant, battery operator, me, and a guy who drove the Jeep. So I had a lot of experience being a forward observer, and all of a sudden I'm put into the Fire Direction Center at Battalion headquarters. That's where the mathematics are done, and the commands over wires, the telephone wires and radios are sent to the guns for firing. I did that for about 3 months, and then I was got a promotion. I was a gunner corporal, a guy that actually ran a gun underneath a sergeant who was head of the gun section. And being a gunner corporal, I was second, and I was the guy that looked through the panoramic telescope and made the adjustments to sight in on the aiming stakes and so forth. And I did that for a number of months. That's what I was doing during the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium in the winter, which was cold. And that's his call. What was I saying there?
You're describing your duties as a gunnery.
It's a gunner corporal.
Gunner corporal.
Yeah, I was a gunner corporal. I'd been made a month or two earlier a T5 specialist as a result of my radio work and survey work. Now I was a gunner corporal. They're both two stripes. Mm-hmm. The T5 specialist has got a T under the two stripes, and a gunner corporal is just the two stripes. And and then following the Fire Direction Center and the gunner corporal, and then the Fire Direction Center, I was put back on OP crews for the rest of the campaigns, and became, in the latter months, one of the forward observers crew, the forward observer, and that's when they gave me my commission. And although I was actually performing the duties sometime before.
Now, in the Bulge, was your unit? How was your unit called into the Bulge? We were on the Siegfried line, mm-hmm. maybe 60 miles north of where the Bulge happened, southeast of Aachen. And that night, 16th, the very first night, something like the 16th of December, we heard via radio that there was a hell of a commotion going on down there. And we said amongst ourselves, the word came down from the officers, of course, and the comments, the rumors about this problem, fairly close by, south to us, and it looked big. And suddenly we saw there were some roads going south, of course, and on one road we saw some advanced elements of the 1st Infantry, the big red one, the 1st Infantry Division going down there, and we knew them, of course, because we'd been alongside them, near them quite a bit by that time. And when we saw them going down, we said, hey, and right then, bang, we told, move, march order. That's the artillery firm to move out, get going, pack up and move out. And within, 30, 50 minutes, we were on the way going south. And our assignment turned out to be to hold the north shoulder of the Bulge. The Bulge by that time had been going
had been going straight on in, but there was a north and the south point of entry, and there were other divisions in the 1st Army, because this was the 1st Army area down south, and the commanders made the decision to hold the two shoulders, north and south, and let the bad guys go on in until they were stopped. So when all of a sudden, after 40 or 50 miles, whatever it was, we were in a position there, and all of our artillery guns were facing and firing into Germany, which was straight west. And we noticed that our brother division, the 1st, they were in and around us, and their assignment was also the same, to help hold the north shoulder, and their assignment was to fire into the boat. So their guns were firing due south, and we were firing due west, and stayed there right through till the end of the Bulge a month later. And as an example, when that famous Normandy massacre occurred, which was only 15 miles from us, and we heard about it immediately, it just upset everybody, and we said, we will go down and get those. We're right only 20 or 30 miles from, I forget the name of the little town, that Normandy. We had maps, of course. We're only 20 miles from there. And we said, we're going to go down and get those guys. Of course. Didn't happen. We stayed right where we were, kept firing straight into Germany. We moved at all. Other troops that were in that area were assigned to do that job. And by that time, Montgomery had been given command of all of the forces in the northern part of Bradley's army there, and he was sending some of his troops down. So that's why we didn't have to go, although we wanted to that area.
What was your gear like? Did you have winter gear at that time?
Yes. Yes, and we were all acclimatized because we'd been living in the field ever since the nice summer, and then the fall, and it was cold then, but we were, we were acclimatized to living off the ground, washing in streams. We got delivered to us in water delivered to us in jerry cans, and it was freezing cold, but there'd be some days were sunny and so forth, and other days weren't. The reason I mention acclimatized, we had sweaters and field jackets plus the standard OD overcoat, so we tried to not to use the overcoat until it really got cold. We used it sort of a blanket in the pup tents that we had. And then we noticed a lot of guys during the day wearing overcoats, and they were from brand new divisions who weren't acclimatized. We could tell whether a guy was from our division, guy 200 yards, 300, 500 yards away. If he was wearing an overcoat in the daytime, he was from a recruit division. We didn't need it, except at night. So all you had to do was be careful not to touch the barrels of the guns. Your fingers would stick to them, and you couldn't. The only way you could get them off is tear the skin off your hands if you did that. So we learned about that, but we were acclimatized. Nobody caught cold or anything like that. The worst part of it was not to let the snow. We were in 3 and 4 feet of snow all the time. Not to let the snow get into your socks. We didn't get the shoe packs, the rubber boots, till later on. All the guys in the rear were getting them. We didn't get them till later on. And we had to be careful about, and we were advised to do this and knew it, we just had extra socks that we'd carry around in our hip pockets, and we'd try to dry them overnight. and keep the socks, keep your feet as dry as possible so that you didn't get trench feet. And a lot of guys in our division still got trench feet, but a lot fewer than guys in the recruit divisions who had been told how to handle this, but just didn't know it. Didn't know how to do it really until they learned the hard way.
Did you ever have any problems with being resupplied with food, ammunition, so on? Did you
Ammunition, yes. We had plenty of food. I mean, the canned, K rations, the C boxes or whatever they were. We never went hungry, but we were under several times under severe limitations on shells, the shortage of ammunition for the howitzers, and that was, of course, we were told how many rounds we could fire. That the experts in the Fire Direction Center, and knowing from headquarters further on up how many rounds we could expend depending upon the targets and the problems at that time. And the shortage of ammunition at times was as serious as the shortage of gasoline, which everybody knows about. But that finally got changed. We had plenty of ammunition by the time we hit the Rhine River.
How long were you consecutively in combat?
The entire time till VE Day, which was close to a year, with the exception of a rest period of just several days after the Normandy Peninsula was cut and solidified. Between say the end of June, we had a rest period there of 3 or 4 or 5 days. Otherwise, we were in the line continually to the end. Now, in the line to us meant divisions were kept in the line constantly, and they'd be, to give some rest, you'd get pulled back from the front line, maybe a mile or a few miles, but you were still in combat ready. You were still under the possibility and probability of being shelled by enemy fire, plus the V1s and the V2s and all of that. So and then you'd go back into the front lines, and another one of your regiments or another division would get some period of rest where you just weren't under direct fire attack constantly.
Did your group suffer many casualties?
Yes, I can look up in my book. I've got it. We suffered more. We suffered thousands of them. Only 2 divisions suffered more casualties than the 9th. If you want to cut that off for a minute, I'll look it up. It won't take it.
How close, when you were in the front lines, how close were you to the front in your battery?
Well, that's easy to answer because we're supposed to be hitting the enemy, the battery is, and if you're in the battery, not a forward observer, the guns could shoot as far as 16 or 17,000 yards, and they would usually be going over the front line as opposed to trying to hit the front line. So we were up where we were. If we could hit the enemy, so could they hit us. So we're talking about from a few thousand yards to maybe 10 the average. Now, a forward observer would be up close, in the range of yards, or a few hundred yards. Occasionally, you'd be on the point. There was sometimes, when I was a forward observer, we, depending upon the geography, in the position of the enemy, you might be out in front of the front line. The word the front line in World War II was different from the front line in World War I, which is trenches,
Right.
a very specific area of no man's land. We had no man land areas too, but they were much bigger. And
How did you feel about the German 88s?
what a wonderful weapon. Absolutely fabulous. It's a weapon that was an anti-aircraft weapon and a direct firing artillery weapon, but just by lowering the barrel. They could hit a plane up at 20,000 feet, and we were under fire of the 88s quite a few times, and if you heard them, you were all right, because the one that got you, you didn't hear.
All right, after the Bulge, then you went on, followed the front through into Germany?
Yes, the next real target area was the Rhine River, and of course there was a lot of feeling about getting, a bridge safe without it having been blown up by the Germans across the Rhine. And the 9th Armored Division accomplished that. And my division happened to be right close to them, and we were the 2nd Division over the Rhine, the 9th being the 1st Division over the Rhine, but the 9th Armored Division. But the 9th Armored Division's assignment was to stay on this side of the Rhine to contest and continue on battling the Germans that were in that area. And there was a whole German army down there on our side of the Rhine. And the 9th Armored Division was assigned to handle that. So we were really the 9th Infantry Division. I went over the very second day, something like March 8th, that the bridge was actually, the Remagen Bridge was actually captured. And we were the 1st Infantry Division, the 1st Division after the 9th Armored to get over, and the 1st Infantry Division, which was needed. And we went immediately, I was on an LP crew at the time, and just went up to a big hill and set up an OP post up there, and stayed there for about 10 days, firing into Germany and firing targets that we could see. It was a wonderful OP post for visibility. And from there I saw 7 or 8 days after we'd gone over, saw that bridge collapse all of a sudden from bombing that had weakened it further, that kept weakening it. And by that time we had a lot of pontoon bridges that were ferrying troops over, or the troops could go over on, and there were engineers, Army engineers, working on trying to shore up that bridge. And of course, all of a sudden that bridge collapsed, and about 30 or 38, as I recall, 38 engineers died and drowned that collapse. And I saw that happen top of this hill. So they were maybe 800 or 1,000 yards at the most away. I heard the noise and saw all this dust coming up. That was the end of the bridge. But we didn't need the bridge anymore. In fact, we weren't using the bridge then because everybody knew it was unsafe at the time. But we lost 3 of our casualties who were nearby at that time from the strafing that the German planes had been doing on that bridge since we had first taken it. And that strafing included the new planes, the new jet planes that the Germans had.
What did you think when you saw those?
Oh boy! Another super weapon like the 88 that they had. One of his secret weapons. It was secret weapons. We didn't know what the hell they were. Although we had earlier been subject to the V1s. The V stood for, in German language, the Vengeance weapons, the V1s and the V2s. So we knew those were the ramjet pulsing engines. So the pure jets, of course, were pure, not pulse jets.
Right.
And you could, how fast they went. And our pilots at the time, our own Air Force pilots, they learned how to avoid them and hopefully come down on them from the top. And our own pilots sort of learned how to down, and they did down these jet planes if they were able to get up high enough above them to come down on top, figure out where they were headed for, and hopefully before the V1 or before the jet pilot could really see them.
Okay, following Remagen, where did you go from there?
Due west into Germany, and participated along with many other divisions in encircling the Ruhr River, which the Ruhr Valley, which was the big industrial area of Germany. That was encircled, and then that was cut up. That's where the German commander Model, I think his name was Model, Field Marshal, gave up, and he didn't surrender. He killed himself, because a Field Marshal, we learned later, doesn't surrender. A German Field Marshal doesn't surrender. So he wasn't going to surrender his army. This was quite a story we found out later. He knew that he was completely surrounded, and that to stay fighting, just everybody would be killed. So he wanted to surrender, but he couldn't. So he issued an order to his army, dissolving the army, and saying to everybody in the army, whether an officer or a private, the army is dissolved, so you can, in effect, go home if you can escape. And then he went out with his jeep driver into the woods somewhere and shot himself, and was buried right there. He was found about 20 years later, and was properly removed and buried wherever his family was buried. That was Model. And he saved a lot of German lives by dissolving his army, which had never been done before, but he didn't surrender. And as a result, his family and he and the army wasn't in disrepute, or failed. And of course, from there we went on through to a mountainous area that wasn't too far from the Elbe River, and that's where we went through and visited that terrible Nordhausen concentration camp, where the V2s were being made, and Werner von Braun was the genius of that camp, the technical genius. And I know that Werner von Braun and 100 of his guys came over to help start our program down there. But he knew what was going on in Nordhausen. He was down there all the time. And now, true, he wasn't in command of the SS guys who ran Nordhausen, so he wasn't giving any orders to work these poor guys to death, which is what they did. But he knew about it, and I guess he couldn't, or felt he couldn't do anything about it, and he didn't. So I don't want to hear anything about Werner von Braun knowing and seeing what he, in effect, allowed to continue on. And I've been down to our 3 centers of you know, where they make the stuff.
All right.
And where they shoot it off, and where the command center is. I've been to all three of those. And I've got books on Wernher von Braun's history. And I always felt that America, I wrote it up in my book, America did America close its eyes to what Wernher von Braun had been doing, merely to get 100 experts over to save a few months' time in building our space program? And my answer is yes. America did close its eyes to bring him over and allow him and everybody else to become American heroes.
How did you feel personally when you saw these camps?
Revulsion is the word that everybody uses. And General Eisenhower, when he saw some camps in the Nordhausen area, he describes it in his books, and he had Patton with him. They got sick in their stomachs, and he sent out an order to all combat divisions when they captured in any of these areas, like the Nordhausen area. Nordhausen is the name of the city there.
Right.
In the Nordhausen area, to parade every single person, as German civilian, through the camp. Every person, including children over something like 10 years old. If you were a child 10 or under 10 years old, you didn't have to go. But 10-year-old children and up, everybody was paraded through those camps. And they all said, "Oh, we didn't know." You know, the standard expression. We didn't know what was going on. And we saw that, and here was a huge camp, and there were many of these other camps, of course. Here are these huge camps that were run by the SS troops, and they needed civilians, technicians, civilians, you know, come in and lay wire, do technical work, do things like that, and those civilians would go back. What do you mean they didn't know what was going on? What a bunch of... so we felt pretty strongly. I felt pretty strongly about that. We didn't know. That was a hell of an answer. They got the answer to that as a result of the trials.
Do you think von Braun should have been tried?
All I know is that I don't think he should have been glorified and sent back to America with 100 guys right away to help our space program get developed a few months earlier than it would have been. We had plenty of guys like Goddard, the Space Center. We knew a lot about, not as much as he did and the Germans did, but how long would it have taken? I say a couple of months to have developed a V2 type of program. So I don't know that he should have been jailed or anything like that. Now that you asked me that question, I think he should have been tried in some way and let off. But tried in some way and with his sentence, a small sentence or let off. Instead of bringing him back to make him a hero. He's no hero to me.
How close did you get to the Elbe River?
To what?
The Elbe River? You said you...
Oh, right on it. All the divisions were on it.
So you were halted there. What did you think of having to halt there and wait for the Russians?
We got bored. We wanted to go on. Actually, we didn't want to go on because we'd been through a lot.
Yeah.
We knew, what I meant was, we knew that we and the other divisions could have gone on and taken Berlin ahead of the Russians, time-wise. But it's in the books. Bradley told Eisenhower it'll at the cost of 100,000 lives. That's in Bradley's book. And by that time, we were just sitting there waiting for the Russians. We knew we couldn't go over the Elbe. we were waiting, everybody knew this, that the Russians were coming up and they'd be at the Elbe soon, and we weren't to go over the Elbe. So we didn't care. It just got boring.
Did you ever have any encounters with the Russians?
I never did, no, but my division, the 9th Infantry Division, was right alongside, just to the left, just to the north of the division that first met the Russians, which was the 69th Division. All of our divisions were just, along the Elbe in a stream, and we were the next division to the 69th. Actually, we met, our officers met the Russians the day after the 69th first met them. I think it was at that place called Torgau. We were probably, and my battalion were probably maybe 3 miles north of Torgau when we contacted the Russians for the first time. And then it was amazing to us, but obviously it had all been worked out and planned before. The day after VE Day, which was May 8th or May 9th, we packed up and moved back to the Autobahn and went right down to the Munich area where my division, the 9th, was assigned to occupy in a big circular area around Munich. That was the 9th's assignment. And I was in that area for 6 months till I left to go back home on points.
Did you have much contact with the German people while you were in the Munich area?
Well, that was a joke. Yes and no, because the orders from Army headquarters to everybody was no fraternization. Absolutely no fraternization. That order turned out to be impossible to really, and consequently it only lasted maybe, 2 or 3 weeks. And then you could do whatever fraternization you wanted to, because the Germans, they were so glad that we were, and not the Russians, were occupying them. They couldn't have been more friendly. And Munich, as I mentioned, we were stationed in a little town called Pfaffenhofen, which is a suburb, in effect, of Munich, maybe 10 miles away, 15 miles away. Munich, most of Munich had just been flattened, not by fighting over, but by bombs over the years. And there was nothing there, and in many other towns. Dresden's the famous one, but I mean, Cologne, any big city like that had been flattened by bombs for years, and there was nothing was working. There was no post offices, there were no shops open, there was no banks, nothing was operating, and the people that lived out in the farms, they were supplying the money. Our pay in German marks didn't mean anything. You couldn't go into a store and buy anything. The currency of any kind was useless, and it was a barter system that allowed the Germans to survive. And you should have seen the kids that would line up for at the end of meals, would line up to get whatever they could to eat. And somehow or other, food got into the city dwellers. And they say it was a barter system that, lasted 3 or 4 weeks. Cigarettes the money was cigarettes. It was worth more than gold. We had these little packs of cigarettes, that came in the sea ration cans. They were all over the place. There maybe be 10 or 12. I never smoked, so I'd give my cigarettes away. But that was currency used for bartering. that got straightened out, of course, in due time, but talking due time, about 6 or 8 weeks.
When did you return to the States?
On points, like everybody did.
Right.
General Marshall set that plan up, and I often thought, as I recall, my point score was around, I think 90. And you could go home first at with something like 85. The enlisted men, or any officer, could go home at, if you no, the enlisted men could go home at 85. The officers, maybe the score was 95. Here I was 90. I had more points. I often said, why did I accept that battlefield commission? I should have said no. Because I accepted it, I got more time dangerous time as a forward observer, and here I am still sitting home. I could be home by now. So then my point score came up where I was eligible to go home. And I didn't have to take so much baloney anymore because I was on the eligibility list to go home, but I couldn't get home because there was no transportation. But the ships were all used, everybody, all the ships to take you back were returning with divisions whole divisions that were scheduled to go to the Pacific. And any other ship was on its way to the Pacific to carry our troops from the west coast to the Pacific, so there wasn't any shipping, so you just had to stay there. And I remember Dad, my father, who by that time was home, and he'd spent 2 years in the Balkans, and he finally wrote me a letter telling me to stop complaining about, I'm eligible to go home and I can't get home to stop complaining, that's all you write about. And I wrote him a letter back and said, Dad, it's okay for you to write me, so stop complaining about not being able to get home, but you're home. So he laid off any more such letters. I finally got home in January after spending 3 Christmases overseas. I should have been home in the previous September.
Did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
Of the GI, absolutely. Everybody did. It was great at Yale. They were all set up to take it. The time I spent at Yale, which was 2.5 years to finish up, I don't think it cost anything.
Did you ever use it at 5220 Club?
You know, I sort of, what was
it was $20 a week for 52 weeks, kind of an unemployment insurance.
I never needed that, or I never got that, no.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that served with you?
Oh yeah, the 9th Division still has a 9th Division Association.
So you've joined that? Do you
I
any
joined
other
right then early, and I've been to 6 or 7 reunions. They have a reunion every year, and I've been to maybe 6 of them after the 50 years.
Did you join any other veterans organizations?
Well, I'm a member and a former director of what's called the National Order of Battlefield Commissions. And we have reunions every year. It's a smaller group. And all I can say is I was on the young side. All the members of my division, having been through North Africa and Sicily, I mentioned, they were all on the average 6 years older. And they're dying off pretty fast, good now. And same thing with the National Order of Battlefield Commissions. I was one of the, if not the youngest, I think I was the second youngest guy that I knew of to have been awarded a Battlefield Commission. See, I'm 79 now, but all these guys, all my friends and everything else, they're 86 and 88. It's sad.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your interview.
I'd only like to say one other thing if you have time. What helped me a lot during the war were these pros that I was with in the 9th Division, as I mentioned. But the other thing was ROTC, the Reserve Officers ROTC training, high school and college. Now, I had it in high school. Infantry, learned how to do the manual of arms and what military life was like in high school, and I only had it 1 year or 1 term at Yale, as I mentioned, but I learned a lot from ROTC that helped me in later service after that. And I don't want to hear anything about these college kids not wanting ROTC on campus because the Defense Department is against gays. I don't have any feeling about that,
Yeah,
but I have a feeling that that shouldn't stop the right kind of kid wanting to
Right.
get into ROTC, which has saved our country several times, beginning with World War I, when it was first instituted. Well, thank you for...
well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.